Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to this special Superbooth home edition of April's Molten Music Monthly. Well, that was and continues to be the virtual home edition of Superbooth. It's all around us. It's what we eat, it's what we breathe, it's what we absorb through our skin. It is here. It is going to be here to stay. It's going to stretch out into the future for all time because we have learnt so many things. We've learnt how to live stream, how to do chats and interviews, how to beam demos from other places of the world into our living rooms and back out again. It's been an extraordinary time. I mean, none of that makes up for the fact that we can't get together for a fantastic, immense talents to bring all these things to you anyway. And our feeds have been full of live streams from all over the place for all sorts of things. It's been quite an extraordinary thing. And it's ongoing. It's not over yet. So in this edition of Molten Music Monthly, I'm just trying to pull together the things that really spoke to me over the last week or so. I can't include everything. It's just simply impossible. There's lots and lots and lots of things. Some of it's not new. Some of it's older stuff that we're now getting to grips with. Some of it has been announced before that's only just becoming available. Some of it is brand spanking new, and so there's no other information on it other than a little bit of a video. But anyway, settle back, relax. Let me take you as fast as humanly possible through all the things that I thought were cool about Superbooth 20 Home Edition. Erica Synths goes nuclear. ST Modular launches about 1,000 modules. Ritual Modular gets into 1U. 1010 Music gives us a mini sampler. Befaco does a mini VCMC. Expert Sleepers gives us double the trouble. Bastl loops MIDI. Liquid Foam is simply a very cool name for a very cool box. Tangible Waves is going to let us build all our own modules. Strokes 2 is a mad software groovebox thing. This Is Not Rocket Science has a COVID kick drum module. Future Sound Systems has a ridiculously complex VCO. Noodlebox is a thing. Critter and Guitari does video. You can get a whole synth in Kosmo format. ELK Audio OS does something interesting. And there's a whole shed load of stereo filters. But first, Distrokid. Now, I'm always on the lookout for new and innovative ways to fund these videos and get a little bit of backing and sponsorship and that kind of thing, because those things can be useful. So Distrokid got in touch to say, hey, they'd like to sponsor a video. How did I feel about that? And I went, oh, okay. And that was actually quite odd, because I had just spent a bit of time looking at Distrokid to see if it was a platform I felt like moving to. What's it all about? Well, it's about distribution of your music to various platforms: Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, Amazon, something, Rhapsody. Who uses that anymore? Napster. You know, all those cool old streaming platforms. If you want to get your music on there and you're not signed to some kind of label that's going to take care of all that, then through services such as Distrokid, you can send your music out there. Now, I've been a long time TuneCore user. Way back in the day, before the internet existed, I was on TuneCore and all of my music went out that way. It seemed to be the only way to do it. You paid like 50 quid, stuck your album on there, and off it went. But over the years, that has kind of started to drag, because, you know, I've got 4 or 5 albums out there, I think, from a way back, and each time it came up for renewal, it was another sort of 50 quid. Now, that's all right if it's paying for itself, you know, if people are streaming your music and buying your music off iTunes in particular, because that's about the only one that actually makes any money, then I was happy for it to continue going. But then I sort of decided recently that it's not really making its money back, and I was just thinking I'm just going to take it all off because it ends up being a little bit pointless. But then Spotify came out with this little artists app which shows you exactly where and when and how much your music is being streamed and listened to. And I found that quite enlightening. I mean, Spotify doesn't make any money, don't get me wrong, but the very fact that there were people out there listening to my music, continuing to listen to it, enjoying it, sharing it about, that was awesome, felt awesome. And so I felt, well, I really need to keep this going. Why should I take it down if people are listening to it? But I can't live and afford 50 quid an album every time, every year. It's just doing my head in. So anyway, I had a look around to see if there's a better solution, and Distrokid appeared to be it. You can pay them 20 quid, I think it is, and you can put up as much as you like, as many albums as you like, as many tracks as you like, and you just continuously pay the same amount every year. So that seemed like a complete solution to me. There's a little, I have worries over, turning off one thing and turning on another. And also I discovered that I have no idea where my original WAV files and MP3 files are of all my old music. So I haven't actually gone through the process of uploading it yet. But I've certainly made the decision and created an account on Distrokid ready to go whenever that happens. So thank you, Distrokid, for offering to sponsor this video. And there's a link downstairs in the description which will give you a 7% discount on your first year. Yay! So, if you fancy giving it a go, you want to distribute your music across multiple platforms, just like that, then do. And I'll certainly report back on my findings on how well that goes. But as far as my research goes and looking into it, then it looks like the best way to go. Unless there's something specific about TuneCore that they offer. I couldn't find anything in particular that meant that I was going to stay there other than my own sense of loyalty. So yeah, I'm going to be moving. So that's the plan with that. Moving on to the gear then. First up I have ELK Synths. ELK Synths have released a new bunch of Fusion modules that I was extremely fortunate to get my hands on them in order to do some videos for them. I'm also going to be reviewing them for Sound on Sound magazine. What you get is there's a new wave shaper, VCA, ring modulator, all in one module. You get this Fusion modulator and you get this flipping awesome filter. They're dark, they're black, they're packed full of tubes, they sound gooey, squelchy and all those sorts of fabulous things. And they are flipping amazing, I have to say. So do check out my full videos on those, which are in the channel. But just in a nutshell, you've got the VCA2, which is a tube-driven voltage-controlled amplifier that's got ring modulation built in and wave shaping. You stick in a couple of signals, mix them, wave shape them together, they float around. You've got knobs that control position of how it's working its way through those tubes. It's interesting. Fascinating. Ring modulator is something else, and it's always active, so it'll take whatever signals you plug in and stuff it out the ring modulation end, or you can patch into it separately, which is really cool. So it's perfect for those Doctor Who noises and other bits of crazy zaniness, and it also just adds a bit more flavour to the waves that are going through it. It can also operate, of course, as a regular VCA. But where's the fun in that? The Fusion modulator is a strange beast. It's the thing which I've kind of struggled with the most because it's a little bit out of my experience. It's a modulation module which can generate all sorts of envelopes that use something that comes from the EMS Synthy. It has a way of doing attack and decay, but then with an on and an off between them. It's a strange balance between coming in, holding on, going off again, and then looping that round. It generates both positive envelope and also regular bipolar LFOs. It also has a noise circuit in there and sample and hold and all sorts of other gooey bits and pieces. The last one, and probably the most fun, was the new filter, the voltage control filter 3, packed full of tubes. Again, although the tubes is being combined with Vactrals to provide the cutoff and resonance circuitry. So it's not necessarily using the tubes to thicken up or fatten up the audio signal. It's being used to control the circuitry within, which is very, very, very interesting. The sound is sweet. It's the most lovely sounding ELK Synths module I think I've ever heard. Previous filters from them I tend to find a bit polyvoxy, a bit gritty and earthy, whereas this is soft and smooth and silky and sweet sounding. It's really quite remarkable. One standout feature that it has also is that it has a knob that you can use to record CV. So if you imagine this knob is affecting the cutoff, you can decide to do a little bit of cutoff wiggling, and that can be recorded so it continues after you take your hand off the knob. Now that's interesting in lots of ways, because not only can you apply it to things internally, but you could also take it out and start modulating other things together with the filter. And it's just simply a great way to sculpt in there a bit of sound and a bit of movement without having to employ other modules to come in. So yeah, they're great. They're part of a Fusion system number 2, which is a fabulous looking thing, which includes the VCO they've already done, a couple of those I think, and just makes this awesome synthesizer voice in a box. What a fantastic thing. Now ST Modular kind of make me laugh a little bit. They're fantastic. He's totally prolific, is Stefan from ST Modular. He, over the course of Superbooth, they seem to announce modules and modules day after day after day, 2 or 3 at a time. Just tons of stuff. Now, the thing you have to understand about ST Modular is that he doesn't make modules. He designs modules and then manufactures the PCB and the faceplate, and then the rest is up to you. I mean, it's quite a neat way of doing the whole selling modular stuff, because you're not having to spend all your time building modules. You build 1 or 2 and then they sell the rest as kits, and not even complete kits. He's not spending his time counting resistors either. Faceplates, PCB, the rest is up to you. I mean, that does narrow your market rather, but for people who are up for a little bit of DIY, there's a Facebook group devoted to it, and you can just get in there and get on with it, as long as you don't mind picking and sourcing your own components, which is no bad thing. I'm sort of moving to that point, I think, myself. But a whole stack of really interesting, beautiful looking modules, and far many really to mention. But he's had everything from, you know, like a little single fader to this Dirty Dan filter, through to some kind of mixing crazy thing. We've had the Boba Fett, which I might have talked about last month, and the hi-hat module, both of which are fantastically named as much as anything else. He has something called Push, which you set 4 voltages on and then stick that through your rack with a button press, I think. There's the Good and Evil voltage generator, which is kind of like a twisted LFO. And there's the Phoebe mixer with some fantastic looking knobs on there. Of course, though, you'll have to source the knobs yourself. So ST Modular, you know, if you're into DIY, you want to make some modules which look cool, sound pretty awesome, and you're happy sourcing your own parts, then do go and check that out. Ritual Electronics out of France had a whole bunch of 1U stuff. That seems to be coming up a lot recently, 1U. It's like I probably should have 1U somewhere in here just so I could use them. Or maybe I'll split a row into 3 lots of 1U. Is that pointless? I don't know. Anyway, it's an interesting format. It kind of forces people into the idea of trying to do something clever within a much smaller space. Again, smaller than your rack. And so it tends to be single function, which is no bad thing. I like the simplicity that it appears to force upon manufacturers. But anyway, Ritual Electronics seemed like a bunch of rock and rollers. They like loud noises, distortion, that kind of thing, as far as I can gather. And so they've got this bunch of 1U stuff which just looks interesting. Yes, they have a distortion, very hard distortion, the sort of thing you could plug guitars into if you wanted, you know, which is no bad thing. Do that. But they also had interesting things like an expression pedal adapter. So you can stick a volume type expression pedal in there and use that to map to a filter or something like that. They also had a momentary switch pedal adapter, so you could stop things or turn a gate on, turn a gate off, switch things. Interesting. They had a noise generator. They had a comparator which throws out a gate whenever something goes past a threshold, and they had some signal mixing thing going on. But it's the distortion, I think, that I really like, which is also called the guillotine, which of course is perfect. But all of this does make me wonder whether I really should have some 1U in my rack. 1010 Music are a crazy digital company that have been doing Eurorack modules in the same kind of sized format, large touchscreen, couple of knobs, loads of patch points, and they've got all sorts of things running on different firmwares within that design. They have a new version of their Bitbox sampler in that format, but they've also released a smaller one called the Bitbox Micro. Now that does appeal. I mean, I don't really need this big module, particularly sitting into my rack. So something smaller, more petite, less imposing, I think is no bad idea. It still has all the same kind of innards, the same sort of polyphony, the same sampling engine where you can sample in, you can cut, you can slice, you can put stuff across pads, you can build up multi-layer instruments, you can stick in a folder or an SD card and have that as a multi-layered sample instrument directly within your Eurorack. Or you can just put fart and dog noises, you know, onto pads and hit those individually. It would also stream enormous audio files, if you wish, off your SD card. It's great, it's fast, it's funky. I think it fits better into that space. You know, the original modules for me were just a little bit too big and seemingly cumbersome and complicated, whereas this neatens it in such a way that I think it makes it accessible to a lot more people. Do I want samples in my Eurorack? You know, sampled instruments, a piano? I don't know. I mean, I quite like an electric piano anyway. I mean a real one, sitting about here, I think. So maybe that's one way of taking that idea in, but then you've got polyphony to deal with. How are you going to deal with that within a Eurorack? Maybe you don't. Maybe this is the sort of place where we start getting into things like the Arturia Keystep Pro with its CV and polyphonic MIDI sequencing. Maybe that is where the access comes from. I don't know, but it's a neat, nice looking little module, which I think is, I don't know, I think that's the one that's going to really win it for them. And one of these days, I hope to give it a try. I had a great chat with Manu from Befaco over Superbooth on one of my Molten chat nights, which is really interesting. Talking to the guy, he's a lovely bloke. They make a lot of kit stuff as well as assembled stuff, and I've enjoyed making many of their kits, which I have in my rack. One of the things of theirs I've tried is the VCMC, which is a very interesting module that takes control voltage from your rack and stuffs it out as MIDI. So these become MIDI control faders, which are actually attenuators or for the CV that's coming in. You can send it gates, you can send it triggers, you can send it notes, and that could be mapped to any kind of program change, any notes on and off, velocity, modulation, whatever you like. CV to MIDI, CV to MIDI, which is an interesting way to go. Most often you tend to hear about things being MIDI to CV. You're trying to take control out of your DAW into your rack, whereas this is using your rack to put the control into bits of software. So you can start including software in your modular performance rather than having your modular run by your software. Does that make sense? Anyway, they've released a new version, which is a much smaller version, a very compact version called the CV Thing. And it takes 8 channels of CV and stuffs it out over MIDI on USB or TiNRS MIDI. It's got the same nice little screen, doesn't have all the faders or all the buttons. You're just putting CV in, allocating it to something on the other side in the MIDI world, and off you go. Brilliant, simple. Really like that. The other thing they had was something that we've seen previously at other shows, and that was the Perkle, I think, which is this 4-channel device which can create percussive noises out of absolutely everything. So it has a kind of envelopes in there which you use, stick some noise in, the envelope triggers and goes, and that gives you your snare drum, or you can use an oscillator to create a kick drum, and then you can also route the envelope back out to give you a little bit of pitch change on that as well. It gets complicated. You can also choke one channel to another so you're not getting over. Anyway, it looks like a great percussion module, a way of creating percussion out of anything, which is perhaps better than trying to keep buying modules which are a kick drum, which are a snare drum. Maybe this is the way. Maybe that's a better way forward. I have it in kit form, and I plan to be making it relatively soon. It's a bit chunky though. There's a lot in here, that's for sure. Big news from Expert Sleepers is that they have a new Disting. Oh yes, the Disting Mark IV has now evolved. It's moved, it's widened, it's spread itself, and it's become the Super Disting EX Pro A or Plus A or something. Oh no, they seem to be calling it the Disting X or the Super Disting. I mean, who cares? But what you get is 2 Distings next to each other. Brilliant. It's a dual Disting, but with a couple of really, really, really important things. First of all, it has a display. Actually has a display that tells you stuff. So you're no longer trying to read words as they scan across a couple of lights on the front, or trying to identify some combination of LEDs to work out where the heck you are and what the heck is going on. So you finally have a screen that should tell you things. I mean, Disting, if you're not familiar, is a digital module for Eurorack, which is just packed full of functions. So you can do pretty much anything with it. It's got effects inside, it's got modulations inside, sequences, quantizers, a whole raft of stuff. I mean, you could have an entire rack just of Distings and make every noise imaginable, I imagine. But, I mean, personally, what I find with it is that it's useful for working things out. So if you want to understand how sample and hold works, then you can use that module, work it out, and then once you've settled on something, you'll probably then go and buy a dedicated module to do that, and then use a Disting for something else. But it's great at that because it has so many algorithms inside, so many possibilities, that it just allows you to play with what your Eurorack could be doing if you bought these other modules, or just, of course, use the Disting. But the Super one, it gives you 2, but it also gives you, better memory, faster, better sample rate. It can now start to accommodate bigger reverbs, longer delay times, all that kind of thing. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see it in use, because at the moment we've only really had a quick blah of it, but it's inevitably going to be one of those things which makes its way into your rack. Having said that, it is that little bit more expensive, whereas one of the cool things about the Disting, the smaller one, is that it was really affordable, whereas the Disting X, the Super Disting, is more like 300 quid. So, but probably one of the most useful multifunction Eurorack modules there is, ever has been, and probably ever, well, until the next one. Bastl had a MIDI looper. What's that? Well, it's a little box, right? Just a little box, and it loops MIDI. Now, it doesn't sound terribly exciting, but it's more exciting than you could possibly imagine. It's only the smallness of your mind that's not quite open to the idea of this as a MIDI looper. So as a little box, plug in a MIDI keyboard, plug out to some MIDI synths or sound modules or whatever. Could be your DAW, of course, could be software, whatever. And rather than sequencing, rather than programming, rather than getting on your mouse and creating a loop, all that kind of thing, no, you just hit a button, play, hit a button, and it loops. That's it. But it's MIDI it's looping. It's not looping the audio. So as it's MIDI, you can then get tweaking on your knobs. You can then get tweaking on doing stuff. You can modulate. You can put other stuff into it and change the sound. You know, all those beautiful things about MIDI, but in a very real time, hands-on, instant, no fuss, no messing way. You're not going in and editing individual notes. You've just played a little thing and that's going around. Fantastic for live performance. That's the perfect way to bring some kind of MIDI, some kind of other synthesizer into Eurorack performance. Perfect. I love it. I mean, I want a little module version. That must be a possibility somewhere down the line. But you can also pump CV into it, so you can trigger it and trigger the loop via a pulse from your Eurorack or somewhere else. And I'm sure there's a whole load more stuff in there. I mean, you can trigger the recording and then the loop. Of course, you can quantize it. You can quantize it all sorts of different things. You can probably apply and record MIDI modulation to apply that to other things. Tons of stuff. But the simplicity of it, it really, really appealed. So for instance, I could grab my MS-101, which is over there, I can sit it next to here, and I can just play a little line, and that will continue to go around. I could do that in the sequencer, of course, for the MS-101, but that sequencer is only so big, or only so many steps, and whereas this is not step sequencing, it's just recording whatever it is that you play. And then if I don't like it making that sound, I can move that sound to something else, or I can change the patch or whatever. It's that level of instantness and simplicity. I love that. What a fantastic thing. So yeah, that's one of my favourite things of the show so far, I think. The deliciously named Herbs and Stones had the similarly deliciously named Liquid Foam. What the heck is that? Well, it's some kind of groove box. I mean, looking at it on the website, you're kind of thinking, oh yeah, it's going to be some kind of weird sort of noise experimental machine for weird noisy experimental type people. You know, people who really know what they're doing, who are trying to get into the art of it. And then it just kicks out these acid tunes and you go, oh wow, no, that's actually really fun. It's based on a dual sequencer that's got these, it's all like a square sequencer that's going around, and you seem to take patch points out of different points on the sequencer, presumably to run different things or not. Oh, I don't know. But there's some kind of synthesizer knocking around inside. Apparently the pitch is generated by using some kind of interestingly weird, so it has weird and experimental stuff in it, don't get me wrong. It's just the grooviness of it was really quite a surprise. And I wasn't expecting it to be so fun and so awesome. But they did a great demo on the Heimbach live stream. Go and check that out. And perhaps more importantly is that alongside this, he's got a load of other stuff coming. We've got a Eurorack version of the Liquid Foam, I think, and then he's got a desktop filter, which sounds really, really interesting, and lots of other bits, including some kind of video thing going on. So this is just seemingly the beginning of wonderful boxes that do wonderfully interesting things. So if you've not come across that before, the Liquid Foam from Herbs and Stones, check that out. Tangible Waves are the people behind AE Modular, which is this very brave sort of proprietary modular system. The idea being that it's smaller than Eurorack, uses patch wires, simple front panels, simple electronics, and it's good and cheap. Sounds great, brilliant value. You can buy an entire modular system in a relatively small case, and it works and sounds like a modular system is supposed to sound. Yeah, it's quite brilliant. I mean, it's never looked spectacular, particularly it looks a bit kind of dull and a bit kind of wiry, but at the same time it sounds fantastic and gives you the entire modular experience that people like and want out of modular. Anyway, what they've decided to do is to open it up so people can design their own modules. How do they do that? Well, first of all, they give you kind of a breadboard module in which you can stick various bits, resistors, wires, pots and things, and start working on your own design for a module. And then they provide you with like a DIY blank where you build that more succinctly onto a module which then fits into your system. So you can get on designing your own modules, messing around with stuff, either based on their designs, which you can then tweak and modify, or completely your own designs. And then once you've got something right, you sort of commit it to a DIY blank and you can start producing your own modules. What a brilliant idea. What a totally awesome way to introduce more people to the idea of DIY, to expand an already excellent sort of budget system by bringing in even better and cheaper and nicer and more together ways of doing it. I think it's excellent. I can't wait to see what people do with it. I'd love to have a bit of a go, but I don't have any of it yet. So, that's one of those potential projects for a future point, I think. But it's an excellent concept and I wish them all the best with it. Right, I'm going to lurch wildly into software just for a second to mention Strokes 2. Strokes is a generative Euclidean groove box with feedback thingies going on. I'm not entirely sure. It's one of those Max for Live type groove box sequencers, pattern creators that you stick into Ableton and it creates a whole load of stuff. It just creates stuff. You've got patterns going on, you've got triggers and stuff going on, you've got modulation going on. It's a world unto itself, but it looks flipping amazing. You have a bunch of overlapping step sequences. You have modules which are taking care of trigger probability. You have a pattern system which stores and morphs and defines from one preset pattern to another created pattern, and it goes through movement to get from one pattern to another in an awesomely morphing kind of way. And once all the triggering and the gating and sort of stuff is going on, you can apply envelope followers which take those rhythms and those ideas and stuff them out the other end as modulation for other things. It's totally brilliant. I don't really know how it works or what it's doing, but on the screen it's bubbling away and moving and chundering about, and there's noises and bleeps and stuff coming out. It's just quite a work, really. It's a it's a wonderfully put together piece of software. This Is Not Rocket Science have taken the kickle, I think it is, from Befaco, and they've kind of doubled it and expanded it, and they've turned it into a homage to the time that we're in at the moment. So it's kick drums, nasty kick drums, self-filtering, modulating, cross-modulating is probably the word that I'm after, going from one to another, pitching and crashing and bashing into one another, while attacking the COVID-19 through percussion, through the bangingness of oscillators and oscillations and noise and stuff crackling into each other. So this is a one-step solution to curing the entire pandemic through the art of Eurorack modulation and percussive noises. Oh yeah, so it's just gonna bang bang the virus out of you. That's the idea. Or is it? Oh, I don't know. But anyway, it's called the Circular Thing Double Drum. And it's just an awesome sound source for kick drums and other kind of percussive noises. And because there's two of them, as I say, they interact in really interesting ways. The sort of things that This Is Not Rocket Science really love to do, in unexpectedly smashing this into this in order to give you outcomes that perhaps wouldn't have otherwise been there. The front panel looks immense. It's gonna just... I mean, they never match anything. It's never going to match anything in your rack. It's always going to stand out as something bizarre, but it's always in a totally brilliant way. So if you ever wanted to see a couple of kick drums fight each other, then this is definitely for you. Unfortunately, they're only in very, very limited numbers, and I don't think there's hardly any left, but it's worth going to look if you fancy one, and they're the sort of people that would probably just build you one anyway if you asked for long and hard enough. Now, Future Sound Systems like to release really complicated weirdo stuff, and the VCO2, their second voltage controlled oscillator, is no different. It uses sort of DNA scissoring or something. I mean, that sounds really rude to me. But there's something about VCA gluing and recombinating in some kind of recombination engine. It's something weird which has crawled out of the labs, I imagine. And is there any possible way that I can explain it? No, probably not. But there's something about positive and negative DNA combining, modulating, crossing and morphing between each other. So it's like you've got these two VCOs, a positive one and a negative one, that are then sort of bound together somehow, and then there's this third one which is scissoring between the two, somehow moving, either giving you a waveform which is a sum or a negative, transposed on top of one another type waveform, or it's moving from one to the other very, very fast, giving you these strange combination waves, which is then glued together through this VCA at the other end, which stuffs it back together in interesting ways. I don't know, I'm not explaining it very well at all, I don't think, but it looks immense. It's a very wide oscillator, and it's the sort of thing that you can go adventuring with, I think. The 64 Pixels Noodlebox is an interesting sequencer, 4-channel sequencer in a lovely looking little desktop box with an LED matrix display that shows you all the sequencing that's going on. You can do CV gate or MIDI sequencing, and you can have up to 128 steps, which you can split into 4 lots of 32 stepped patterns or something, and have individual patterns and individual timings, all the sorts of usual gooey lovely stuff that we like about sequencers in this sort of format. So it's a desktop box, wire it into different things, massive display so you can see what's going on, and so it sounds to me like it's an enormous creative opportunity sitting there that you can run all sorts of different things with. It has this concept where you can layer up sequences, and sequences that start to affect one another. So a layer on top can affect the layer beneath. You can start to cross modulate between patterns or have patterns affect patterns. They use the word serendipity as if to, create some kind of the idea of an accidental positive outcome to things being laid on top of each other and banging around in that way. I think it's very interesting. It wasn't really at Superbooth, it's kind of on Indiegogo and that kind of thing right now, but it just is a nice looking little sequencer box with some interesting features that are definitely worth checking out. Something else that wasn't really at Superbooth as such was the Critti and Guitari Easy. Now, Critti and Guitari do these wonderful synthesizer boxes with wooden little buttons on them. They have a particular style and a feel, all of their own. And this thing really appealed to me. It's a little video box called the Easy. And what it does is it offers the opportunity to do video synthesis and response to your music. Plug in the audio output of something, route a bit of audio to it, and it generates in wonderful high definition, interesting graphics, not just sort of VGA effects or filters as such. It's more interesting than that. It has all sorts of patterns that you can download. It has a web interface so you can take patterns off, download them from the community, put more stuff on. It's just interesting. You've got waveforms, you've got things knocking around, moving around. I was very, very taken with it. I mean, it's the kind of thing that I believe that you can just stick next to your rig, route something to it, and have that be the backdrop to your performance. Because, as modular performers, we often suffer from not being very dynamic to look at. I mean, there's a wonderful machine to look at, but it's not really very rock and roll. So having some kind of backdrop, some kind of visual interpretation which is in time to what you're doing, in sync with what you're doing, and assuming that you don't have a mate who's going to be doing the video side for you, because we want to do everything ourselves, because we are all about doing it ourselves. And so this is a useful box. But I really like it. It's been on Kickstarter, and it's the kind of sort of thing I might just have to pick up and see how that goes. ELK Audio OS is one of those annoying development platforms that offers an enormous amount of potential, but it's really, really hard to dig in to find out exactly what it is and what you need to do and how you make it work. They've been around for a couple of years, and they did something in a guitar. They built something into a guitar, which seemed, that's interesting. So you're running what, VST plugins inside a guitar? Okay. And then they come up with a Eurorack module, which it was an overly big fat Eurorack module that was running a rack extension from propeller heads, going, right, that's interesting. So how do we get into that? And they'd go, well, no, we can sell you a license to the software. A license to what? To what exactly? Run it in what? Oh, no. You build the hardware. You do all the hard work to develop the hardware for it, and then you put our little OS inside, and then you can run a plugin. Oh, can I? Or any old plugin? No. You have to get that recompiled by the manufacturer. And you go, all right. So the whole thing just seems too hard. It seems too difficult. There seems to be something awesome in here, and it's just difficult to really grasp what it is they're trying to do and what it is they're trying to say. Now, recently at NAMM, we had a few other things down those lines, like the Daisy, I think it was called, where you had a teensy microprocessor thing stuck onto a pedal, stuck onto a Eurorack module that you could program and get into and start using that. Those sorts of ideas. But providing a prototyping platform for it is exactly what you need to do. It's no good just giving us an OS, because what we've suddenly got to invest in all this other time and energy in putting something together which can then run your OS. I found that very frustrating. However, so now the big news is that ELK Audio have now produced a little prototyping platform. Yes! So you get your Raspberry Pi or whatever, you stick your little development platform hat on it, and then you put this new thing called the Blackboard on top, and that provides you with audio ins and outs, MIDI in and outs, CV in and out, faders, knobs, buttons, and a display. Everything that you need to test out the plugins that you want to put inside. Now, it still supports VST plugins, absolutely, but you still need to have them recompiled. So if you're a plugin manufacturer or developer, then do that, recompile them for ELK, and then we can all run them on this little thing. Because what's the point of that? Well, because you can take VST plugins, put them into this piece of hardware and run it as a little hardware box and run things in and out of it, whether it's VST plugins for effects or VST instruments. You can do all of that. So you can have it running whatever you like. It could be whatever you like. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. It's also surprising as well. I mean, it has Ableton Link built in. There's actually a DAW inside, which means you can chain up effects in all sorts of different ways and have multiple instruments and multiple effects going depending on what you're running on. Because you don't have to run it on a little Raspberry Pi. You could run it on something bigger. You could run it on an Intel Atom. You could run it on any x86 platform, funnily enough. But there's still a amount of fog around it in that, what does that actually look like and how do we actually do that? And I'm currently unable really to answer that question. And so are they, so it seems. But it just harbours this enormous potential of being able to take VST plugins into the hardware domain with that level of ease. Because you can, of course, do it from your computer. Yeah, no problem. But it's always a bit of a faff going through audio interfaces and in and out, that kind of thing. Whereas this gives you a little box and it's running everything that you need. You just presumably load up some kind of preset which has your chain of effects or instruments on it, and you go in and out and off you go. Brilliant. Simple, easy. That's what you need. Easy. And that's what is needed all along. Some kind of platform, some space in which you can go, right, okay, I'm testing this out. All right, I'm going to test it with this. That's fine. Rather than having to invent a piece of hardware to make that work. So good job. Well done. I'm still a bit kind of, what is all this supposed to be actually trying to do? But you're getting there. You are really starting to get there now. What we need is a proper demo of that kind of thing happening. What works? What do you see when you load it up? How do you, all those sorts of things. Look Mum No Computer Guy, Sam Bastl has released or has been releasing lots of different little modules in kind of his own format. I mean, apparently it's been around before, but he seems to be picking this up and championing it. It's been called Metric 5U in the past. He calls it Kosmo, probably relating to one of his horrible monsters that he created. And what is it? Well, it's taking Eurorack and expanding it into a format, a size that you can actually use live, because it's a faff and a fiddle using these little knobs often in a live situation. And so he's a very dynamic, moving about kind of guy, and he wants to use the technology, but he just needs bigger things to play with. And that makes a hell of a lot of sense to me. So he has enough of this stuff now to make an entire synthesizer. So I thought, right, I'm up for giving that a go. So I ordered a whole bunch. And just to give you an example, this is like the flipping awesome filter. So it's a Eurorack filter, right? But done in this size. Can you see the difference? See the difference in height, width and size and stuff. So he's made it big enough to make it completely usable. There's the PCB. I love the artwork and stuff on this, both sides. Which side am I supposed to use? I have no idea, because both of them are awesome. So you have this up at a synth, and then you've got loads of space for moving that cut off. You know exactly where you are, what you're doing. Looks fantastic. What a great thing. These were not expensive either, not expensive at all. And of course it's just the panel and PCB, so you're going to have to come up with all the components yourself. But it's a sort of project that I thought, yeah, I could really get into that. I could really get into that. So there's, you know, there's other things like, you know, boring things like a VCA. That I think is an envelope sort of ADSR size thing. You've got that's the oscillator, you know, that sort of size. It's been awesome, fantastic. So the plan is, once I've finished the Decker's Dream, I'm going to be getting headfirst into sorting this out and building myself a Kosmo synth. And finally, there was a whole load of stereo filters. You know, a great big bundle of stereo filters. They were everywhere. This is the year of the stereo filter. I mean, there's too many of them really to go into any detail of them, so I thought I'd just bundle them together to say, stereo filters, hooray! So what's a stereo filter? Well, we're talking about Eurorack, of course, where everything is mono normally. You have one audio in, one audio out, you go into filter, you come out again. With stereo filters, it's not necessarily just giving you a dual filter. Some are. So you've got, you know, 2 channels, 2 things go in and come out, and you can use them in stereo if you want. But most of them are actually designed to be stereo. So you need to take, at some point, your Eurorack needs to start to develop into 2 channels, stereo channels. And that then goes into this filter, and then you've got different peaks appearing in different places within the stereo field. And that's interesting. You're starting to move stuff about, not necessarily moving the audio, you're moving the filter. And that can give strange sort of polyphonic effects with multiple peaks and dual peaks fighting with each other and moving around. Very, very interesting. But there was a whole load. Some of them will also take a mono signal in and splat them out into a stereo space, which is also interesting. So perhaps this stereo filter could be the beginning of your stereo happenings within Eurorack. I mean, the thing that immediately jumps up for me is that, oh my god, I'm going to need 2 of everything. I will need 2 of everything, you know, because stereo means 2 channels, and that's starting to get expensive straight away. But I don't know, is it not? I don't know. Maybe if it's more towards the end of your signal chain, then maybe that's going to be, you know, something that happens at the end, so you don't need lots of different stereo modules. Maybe just 1 or 2 will suffice. I don't know, it's early days. So who do we have these from? So Bastl had a stereo filter, so did Supercritical, so did WMD, and Wrong, I think it's pronounced, Patching Panda and Shackmat. They all had them. So, I mean, I think you best probably just check them all out individually, because I don't know that I can round them up in any particular way, because they all do a similar thing, but they each had some very specific features that perhaps set them apart from other things, or maybe not, I don't know. But suffice to say, it is the time for stereo filters, and it's amazing that there have been so many, and it's completely fascinating that they've come along all together all at the same time. I mean, I was kind of suspecting polyphony, really, more so, because that's been bubbling away. It's something which was quite coming along last year, and I thought that would be a bigger thing this year, but maybe not. Maybe this is a step along the way to polyphony, or maybe this is part of that idea. But suffice to say that things like stereo effects have been certainly on the arise, so maybe it's now time to push ourselves out and think about stereo in a new and exciting way. I mean, one company that got in touch with me was Eurorack Essentials, which is a bit of a misleading name because the things in here are not remotely essential. They're only essential once you understand what on earth they're all about. But they're all about stereo. They're all about playing with the stereo field, all about swapping left and right and flipping things over and backwards. Very, very interesting, and stuff that I've not really grasped yet. I've got one of their modules in here which just flips 2 channels, so it could be used as a stereo flip. Why would you do that? Why would you flip the stereo field? Is that interesting? Apparently it's really interesting. It's just not something I've really considered before. But they've got ones which are, you know, automated, CV controlled or mutable and those sorts of things. Just interesting, exploring the idea of stereo that I haven't really done. I mean, of course, we pan things around in a stereo field, and if you want to get a bit Jimi Hendrix about it, you know, you shift things around. But otherwise, I don't really think too deeply about it. I mean, I don't listen to my rack particularly with a focus on stereo, because it's coming out of speakers that are over there, and I'm not necessarily standing in the right spot anyway. I'm just interested in the general sound. So focusing on stereo in of itself is another thing to explore, another space to get to. yeah, interesting. I'll see. I don't know whether I'm going to get a stereo filter anytime soon. I have plenty of stuff to be getting on with as it is. So there you are, loads and loads of stuff. There's more to come. There's stuff still coming out all the time. There's plenty of things that I didn't even mention. And I'm sorry if you're out there hoping that I was going to mention you and I forgot or didn't or wasn't interested, because it's all really good. I would highly recommend that you go and check out the Heimbach YouTube channel. Heimbach and Constantine have done 3 whole days of like 8, 9, 10 hour live streams covering tons and tons of products and developers and manufacturers, giving them all half an hour each and going to amazing depth on their products and philosophies and who they are and what they're about. It's just fantastic. You know, spend some days going through that, because it's amazing. It's a sort of level we've never ever seen. At the same time, Sonic State are gradually uploading videos from all of the interviews that they've been doing over the past week with, you know, all these manufacturers and bits and pieces. And there's new stuff and new thoughts and new ideas coming from that. Synth Anatomy have also been doing a bunch of interviews with different people, and there's other stuff from them that I've not seen on other places. Also join me for my Molten chats. I'm chatting to people who I find fascinating. I've talked to Mark Doty, I've talked to Helen Lee, I've talked to Mano from Befaco, I've talked to Divkid, I've talked to Gertz from America Synths, I've got Panic Girl coming up, I've got people like This Is Not Rocket Science, Black Corporation, Bastl, Tenderfoot Electronics, all sorts of stuff. Matt Colville from the World of Dungeons and Dragons and a modular enthusiast. I'm talking to him on Thursday, and we are getting stuck into what modular is all about for beginners, how you start with it, how we started with it, and that kind of conversation. We've been talking about music technology, about hacking things, about filter design, about DIY kits, making music, performance. I had a great chat with Eden Gray and about CV Freak's podcast that she's going to be starting, and how to perform with a brand new patch in live performance. That's how she does it. Extraordinary. It's been amazing talking to these people. It never would have occurred to me to do these sorts of interviews before we got into this whole Superbooth Home Edition thing. So it's been a real eye-opener and an opportunity to get into that. But because of these live streams that I'm doing, I'm not going to have time for my own live stream this month, sadly. We'll get back to that at the end of May, or at some point in the middle of May maybe, because I've got another week or 2 of these Molten Chat interviews to do, and this Sunday, when I would be perhaps doing my own live stream, I've actually got Panic Girl here, and I'm going to be talking to Martha about her performance, her albums, her music, the things that she does, her writing, and just her whole vibe with Modular. So that's going to be really interesting this Sunday. And of course, I got loads of videos to come, tons of stuff. Once we get over this sort of Superbooth thing we're in the middle of, I've got a lot more to come. So there you are. I hope that's been helpful. I hope you're staying safe out there in the world. And if you like this video, please share it, please like it, subscribe, those sorts of things. Do pop over to Patreon and throw me a couple of dollars if you fancy supporting what I do. And in the meantime, take care and go make some tunes.